5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Here come the Astros, burning with desire. Here come the Astros, breathing orange fire. Here come the Astros, with winning on their mind. Here come the Astros, number one every time. Go, go, Astros. We want Houston! We want Houston! Alvarez hits a high drive, center field. Veerling's back! This game is turned upside down!
And the pitch is lifted to right by Castellanos. Long run for Tucker, over toward the line, and foul territory. Makes the catch, and the Houston Astros do it again! 2022 World Series champions!
And now, Go Astros. Astros baseball from three guys who've been there since Art Howe had hair. And welcome, everybody. We are back for our whatever it is, Go Astros episode. Orbit is here. He's in the middle of a nap, reluctantly saying hello, but I wanted to give our Go Astros audience a greeting of our mascot. But we also have other people here who are not our mascots. We've got Andy Tom Chesson coming to us from where in the world is Andy today?
I was also in a nap. I was in San Diego. It's 5:45 in the morning.
I'd like the audience to know that I even said, "Are you sure?" And you never responded, so I assume that was a yes. But you look beautiful this morning.
I'm here.
Yeah, and then looking all really just spiffed up is Brian Arbor coming to us from New York. Brian, how are you?
I'm very good. Cheers, everyone.
Andy, are you out there early for the winter meetings? Is that what you're doing? You're going to really try to figure out who's going to get Alex Bregman in a trade?
I've put myself in the portal. I know that's a different show, but I'm just trying to see what other podcasts might want somebody. I'm not saying I'm leaving. I'm just saying it's a good time for me to explore my opportunities and work on my NIL.
I thought about adding a discussion of the Stoops era at A&M, but I didn't want to trigger you. Hey, Brian, so we've seen it.
I survived.
Well, that's right.
It's 2 hours.
We've seen it go from, I think, a silly piece of a low-level writer at ESPN writing it to now Rosenthal's writing about. Mm-hmm. Talk to me a little bit about your take on this Astros Bregman trade thing that's been floating around, and I'll give my take after Andy.
Yeah, I'll offer sort of two thoughts on it here. First one is sort of the media part of it, which is I'm sure somebody's calling the Astros about Alex Bregman. I'm sure somebody's calling them about Yordan Alvarez and, you know, the 22nd guy on the roster down at Fayetteville, right? Because this is the offseason and, you might as well sort of float some stuff out there. The obviously sort of speculation is Bregman and Altuve's contracts in after the 2024 season. And you look at the Astros payroll situation, they're unlikely to be able to keep both.
Right.
Now, again, can they? Yeah, it's just a matter of money. And, on the other hand, it's real easy for me to spend someone else's money. But that's sort of the reality of, I think, and most of us would prioritize Altuve over Bregman of those two. So one thought is, well, if you're going to lose Bregman, you might as well get something for him now. The obvious sort of issue with that is 2024 is a pretty important season for the Houston Astros. And I can say that not just because it's the next season and therefore it's important, but because the actions they did at the 2023 trade deadline is they acquired two pitchers, Kendall Graveman, but most importantly, Justin Verlander, who were under contract for 2024. They essentially did their off-season shopping at the trade deadline. And part of my analysis of the Verlander deal is they're very much pushing in on 2023 and 2024. That seems to be a decision that Jim Crane has made. I expect them to go not a ton, but slightly over the CBT threshold. And so I don't think they're trading Alex Bregman because 2024 is real valuable, and all the trade proposals are basically Bregman for future value. Well, future value is less valuable for this team than it is for others. 2024 value is very strong for this team because it's a year they're set up to again, be a strong contender, go for it. And, they have bigger questions in 2025, but part of what they did at the trade deadline is say, we're worrying about 2025 in 2025, so we can have that discussion next year.
Andy, follow up on that.
This is how we get into every trade rumor. Very, very rarely, I believe, do the national media actually have a connection to what the Astros are doing or thinking. Now, maybe that's changed a little bit with Dana Brown's inclusion in the front office, but I don't really think so. Maybe there's a guy in Atlanta that can get more information about what the Astros are doing than there used to be. But the reality is the Astros were perfectly willing to let the situation that people think is going to happen to Alex Bregman happen to George Springer. They were perfectly willing to let it happen to Garrett Cole. They were perfectly willing to let it happen to Carlos Correa and probably a few others that I'm not going to bother to mention here. I don't see them getting away from that mode of operating business, because winning a World Series or contending for a World Series in 2024 is a whole lot more valuable than having a Rookie of the Year candidate. And that's if you sell high, which I don't know that you do for a 1-year rental, which is what Bregman would be.
And certainly not in November, December.
Yeah, but in 2026, I don't know, to Brian's point, where the value is for that in the Astros. There is a school of thought that says if you're going to get Jim Crane to do something out of the norm and pay Alex Bregman what his market rate is, and keep Altuve and keep Tucker in a couple of years and deal with Framber Valdez, the best way to do that is to win another World Series, because he has more money coming in. If he has more money coming in, he's more likely to do stupid things like sign Rafael Montero. So it kind of is what it is. Enjoy Bregman for this year. I would be shocked, barring, I made this point on Twitter, I would be shocked, barring just a series of injuries and debilitating circumstances, if the Astros aren't one of the 6 best teams in the American League, which means they're a playoff team. And as we saw last year, if you're a playoff team, you can win the World Series.
Yeah, I'll add to that too. I think to me, the whole concept is just silly and a non-starter. And if you are going for it now, you definitely want to have one of the best defensive third basemen. Yeah, his offense can hit or miss, but he's still really, really good offensively on the team, as opposed to a shortstop that maybe someday, because I think I saw a shortstop being on one of the trade proposals. The trade proposal that I saw doesn't make any sense to, again, mortgage the future or mortgage for the future when the future is still really good. We understand that some of what the team's done, those bills are going to come due. Like you said, Brian, in 2025, we're going to have maybe a couple of years of relative mediocrity before we see a team start to build back up again. But 2020, well, I'm not sure why we want to rush that by getting rid of one of our keystone players.
Well, Drayton McClain would want to rush it. This is a Drayton McClain kind of trade, and we saw a bunch of this. No, I'm serious. Back in the 90s and early 2000s. One thing that the Jim Crane Astros have done is, hey, he spent very little in the early years, but he's continued to ramp up the payroll over time as the team's gotten good. The biggest issue with guys like Springer and Cole and the free agents who've left have been he doesn't want to spend, on long-term contracts.
Right.
And part of why Bregman and Altuve are the guys who have lasted is that they have taken 5-year deals, which seems to be the limit on what Jim Crane, and this has been consistent across 3 GMs, on what Jim Crane is willing to do. So that's not necessarily being cheap. That's being, I don't want to spend for the out years. On the other hand, that limits the type of free agents you can get. The reason they're getting Verlander and not Cole is because Verlander is willing to sign shorter term contracts. And again, both with the Astros in his previous 2 extensions, and then with the Mets, and then getting traded back to the Astros for a relative financial, though not a prospect bargain.
I think there's
Go ahead, Andy.
Sorry, I think there's also just the element of this is the hot stove season. There is literally nothing else to talk about. So there's a lot of times where the media will suppose things. Well, this is a team that is going to have contract issues in 2 seasons. So let's suppose what would be. It's very interesting to me that it started with what I think was a Twitter's or a Yankees fan account or Twitter account or
I think
minor
so,
media
yeah.
account. Yeah, that deal really benefited the Yankees because I'm sure they would love to have Alex Bregman playing third base this year. Go figure. But it's oftentimes when you hear trade proposals, it is somebody in the media that has a microphone or a keyboard playing fantasy baseball, which we all get guilty of from time to time without a whole lot of substance. I have yet to see anything of real substance saying the Astros are actively shopping anyone outside of Jake Myers.
Yeah, and just to add to Annie's point, the first time I saw it was a literal, hey, let's make up some fantasy trades, mostly because it would be kind of fun, by Anthony Castro Vince of MLB.com. And that's, James, where you saw the Bregman for this shortstop, this infield prospect with the Orioles, which I think is what you were referring to earlier. And so if you read the article, it's very clearly, I'm not reporting this. This is me just making this up because I think this is some fun stuff to speculate it out. It's completely transparent on the point that Andy's made. But on the second point about there's no clear reporting, and if you look at the Rosenthal article yesterday, and David Coleman, who's got another Astros Substack, and I recommend that, called Astros 3 Things, talked about it just like, wait, what is Rosenthal breaking any news here? And I read Rosenthal's article, and like, not really. What he's just saying is somebody somewhere is speculating on Alex Bregman being traded. And I can sort of see the logic about it, so I will write about that. But there was no clear reporting, to Andy's point, that it's happening. And my read on the situation, my analysis is they're not going to trade him for the reasons I've stated here.
I speculated that Shohei Ohtani signed with us 2 weeks ago, and it's just keeping it under wraps.
Yeah, I think he's already on the team. He's moved. Yeah, he's already here. Because he's too busy working the other guy from Japan to come too.
Correct.
Don't worry about it. We're going to get to the Astros pitching situation. Uno momento. I know this is probably dumb. Do you think this affects Alex Bregman, or does he know it's as bullshit as anything?
Is it going to make Alex Bregman pissed? Because I'm in favor of that.
Andy, what about you? Do you think
I mean, he does have a little bit of the red ass. So sure, anything that he needs to put a burr under his saddle because it makes him play better or focus better. The problem with that is it's December. It's not even December. It's October 29th. He needs to red ass in April.
He's gonna have a hell of a spring.
It'd be really neat if he started the season well.
Yeah,
offensively.
I think Jim Crane ought to offer him the 5-year deal, and then give him a 15-year deal on him being the official salsa of the Houston Astros.
Well, he already does the barbecue sauce.
That's what I'm saying. Let's just go ahead and make all of it a Breggy Bomb. I mean, I do think we can all agree that Altuve is likely to be an Astro for life. Bregman.
That's another point of that. You don't know what Altuve's. We all assume that Altuve is going to re-sign, and I don't, not questioning that. But what does he re-sign for? How does that contract degrade over time? How many years are you signing him for? Because that's going to go a long way to determining what money you have left to do other things. And Altuve, I mean, there is some point where you do have to, even if you're a Scott Boras client, understand that you're in your mid-30s, your skill set's going to wind down at some point. And if you want to continue playing on a winning team, you do kind of have to give a little bit. Now, I'm not saying he's not going to get, I don't even know what he makes now, $25 million a year.
Yeah.
But if that's down to 20, and then it's down to 19 and 18, that gives you a little bit more wiggle room. And then you have some ground to talk to other guys about, well, we have this room and we could do this and we could get creative. You also get into personal services contract world, like Roger Clemens, I'm pretty sure is still paid by the Astros, or at least Drayton McClain's wife. Jeff Bagwell infamously works for the front office. Craig Biggio works in a less public way. But that was part, with Bagwell and Biggio's deals, at least, that was part of their final contract with the Astros, was kind of a memo of understanding that you're going to have a role here and we're going to throw money at you periodically.
Yeah, I will say this. I do think of the three guys that we're going to be talking about, Bregman, Altuve, and Tucker, Bregman and Altuve are the most likely to also do a hometown discount thing. I think they both are. Well, one, Altuve, like that, the only benefit to seeing Altuve go to another team is we will see mental gymnastics at a mega scale for people to start now twisting themselves into knots as to why he's not the villain. But I can see a world where both of those guys feel entrenched in the city and end up doing a team friendly deal. What was not have been a team friendly deal was the signing of Lance McCullers Jr. I'm not sure that I feel like people aren't talking about this enough. Andy, can you just fill us all in on what we've learned from LMJ, the most badass pitcher in Astros history?
You mean the guy that we signed for a 5-year extension and he's pitched 6 games since then?
That's him.
That guy?
That's it.
Maybe it's 8. I lost track. Evidently yesterday, as a preview to the Houston Sports Hall of Fame something celebration, which we do in Houston now, which Lance McCullers is hosting, which is why they were talking to him. He indicated that he's ready to lead a second half charge for the Astros and is confident he'll be pitching sometime after the All-Star break, because guess what? His flexor tendon was worse than anybody thought it was, which is par for the course on Alex Bregman news, because anything dealing with his pitching
LMJ
arm.
news. You're sleeping.
I'm sorry. I'm still on Alex Bregman. On Lance McCullers Jr. news, because everything's been worse about his pitching arm than we thought it was.
Brian, is he ever going to pitch for the Astros again?
Ever's a really long time.
Fair.
And his contract goes forever.
J.R. Richard came back and pitched after a stroke 3 or 4 years later, but
it was a different time though, buddy.
I a couple years ago adopted a position, which is I am not going to take the anything Lance McCullers says about his recovery all that seriously, because Lance McCullers has an exceedingly optimistic take on his health.
I think we should start using the word naive and not optimistic is one thing. Now
glass half full or glass half empty, it's up to you, right? I know what McCullers would say.
It just
it's
a retriever with this thing.
It is a shame that he doesn't have walk-up music, because I would suggest changing that out for reading of To an Athlete Dying Young, just anytime he comes on the field, because he needs to understand sometimes the dream is over.
Yeah. It's a thing. I don't know where, I understand that we're not necessarily owed transparency, but it does seem like, why not just be transparent? I do not believe that they just found out 2 days ago that this was a worse injury than they thought. And I don't know why even mention it if you're not coming back until August, which is what he seemed to indicate, Brian.
I mean, Lance enjoys talking to the media, and the media enjoys talking to Lance. And he's basically the only guy on the team you can say the second part about. So there is almost too much coverage of McCullers, which is not anyone's fault, but just sort of the way things work. And so part of my stance of I'm not going to trust anything McCullers says is because he says too much in that sense, which again, it's great when they're transparent. Lance is too transparent. And I don't think Lance is deceiving us. I think Lance is deceiving himself. I don't think he's intentionally, he's giving us a sunny perspective because he is a sunny personality. This is how he approaches the world. And I'm just calibrating what Lance McCullers says off of that.
Andy, everybody's solution has been, we'll move him to the bullpen. And I'm like, how can you move a guy has arm issues to now having him pitch multiple days in a row and what you would think would be high leverage situations?
Well, to Brian's point, I retract my statement about To an Athlete Dying Young, and we'll go with You're Fooling Yourself, The Angry Young Man by Styx. That's his new walk-up music.
We're deep diving today, guys.
Yeah, I don't. Well,
a
Houseman poem. I will say a Houseman poem is a little bit more of a deep dive than Styx, unless you're Adam Sandler and Big Daddy. I don't know what to hope for an Alex Bregman return. I don't know if he returns, but if he does, I don't know how you could project a guy to be in the bullpen unless you're willing to let him pitch 1 to 2 innings every 5 days, because that's what his arm would hold up to. And that seems like a waste of a roster spot to me. Now, if Dusty was here, you could certainly get away with a bullpen guy that only pitched 1 to 2 innings every 5 days, because we have those. Sometimes every 10 days is fine. but I'm hoping Joe Espada is a little bit more judicious with his use of the bullpen in an intelligent way. He's going to have to be a starter for us if he comes back, when he comes back. And I think if he can get healthy, he's proven he can be an effective major league pitcher. It's just that healthy part has been the issue, not once, not twice, but now 3 times. He's had a Tommy John surgery. He's missed entire seasons. Like I said, he's pitched, I looked it up, 8 games since he signed his contract. One of those was a really bad World Series start. So it would be great if his ego would, and I can say this easily because it's not my money, but it'd be really great if his ego would let him negotiate an exit with the Astros and we could use that money on something else that we actually need. But that's not how baseball works. He'll be given every opportunity, and I hope he's right. I hope he comes back in August and leads the second half charge. Matter of fact, I hope we don't need a second half charge. I hope we're comfortably in the lead by the time that that Lance McCullers comes back, and that we, we're 20 games up and we have all the time in the world to let him figure it out on the mound.
I do think it's interesting, but I want to move on to one more topic. But I think it's interesting that some players get beat up for being injury prone, but McCullers really hasn't. He still maintained this sort of fan favorite thing. We all lived through the Carlos Correa injury prone thing. We even saw it with George Springer. Yet you don't see, it's like this cult of Lance McCullers still really very much is in play. Andy mentioned Dusty Baker. Dusty Baker has left while doing his best to burn it down on his way out, it turns out. Obviously Joe Espada has been in place for a bit. I didn't want to have an episode with just one or two of us, or I guess just 2 of us. I wanted to give everybody a chance to really give their take on it. Andy, starting with you, how are you feeling about the Espada hire? Are you just excited about it, or do you feel like it portends something in the Astros front office that we really can't see happening, or do we get some kind of indication of how things work?
I mean, I'm positive on it. I like to see career baseball guys get their opportunity, and he's still young enough that career baseball guy isn't a damning with faint praise kind of thing. I hope he is the guy he says he is. If you look at some of the managers he's worked at, organizations he's worked at, he certainly should lean towards embracing or continuing to embrace analytics the way the Astros have, be able to apply rational decision making. Not roll with his gut quite as much as Dusty Baker used to be very proud of doing. Having said that, as we talked about for a number of episodes, you don't know what you've got with a manager till they actually manage, and you don't know even if they're the perfect guy and the best guy, and you'd invite them over for Thanksgiving dinner, whether or not it's going to work. So I think it's the right move for the Astros organization, and I'm happy for Joe Espada and his family, and his daughters are precious. And there was a bunch of feel-good moments coming out of those couple of days, but the proof will be in the pudding. And we'll see how vicious Astros Twitter gets since they drove off the last manager. The first time that Joe Espada does something that they don't agree with or like or are able to rationalize.
Yeah, Brian, he's right. I mean, we don't know what you got. We've seen new guys fall on their face. We've seen, I mean, Andy's team just let go a sure thing in Jimbo Fisher. So we've seen it go the other way too. And by the way, Andy, before we get to Brian, were you more positive with the Espada or the Stoops hire?
I mean, the Stoops era only lasted 2 hours. So
Thank God,
I was,
right?
I was, I'm good with the Espada hire.
Right. He was going to quit the football show if Stoops got the job. He's like, I can't do this anymore. Or he was just going to ask me Longhorn questions for however long it lasted. Brian, your take on the Espada move.
Well, it did not produce a rebellion by the boosters. So not threatening the Astros NIL. So, just from that standpoint, better than the Stoops hire. I didn't think A&M was going to go look at, all their choices were the basketball school guys. It was fascinating.
I mean, if you're going to hire Mark Stoops, just keep Jimbo Fisher. Save the money.
Yeah.
Anyway.
You can afford the payout, unlike Arkansas.
Yeah. So Joe Espada has one big advantage, right, which he knows the clubhouse already, including he probably knows players' complaints and frustrations about Dusty Baker better than anybody.
Well, that's a good point.
And again, that's because that always happens, right? And someone's going to need to know. Omar Lopez is going to get to learn all the players' frustrations and complaints with Joe Espada, because that happens, right? It's 26 people. It's people who've been, throughout their life, who've been starting baseball players who have always sort of succeeded. And, it's the hardest level there is. So they'll have all these situations. The job of a manager is primarily to manage the personality, psychologies, egos, mental sort of weaknesses and frustrations of primarily the 26 men in the locker, in the clubhouse, and to manage his coaching staff. Joe Espada is qualified to do that because we've talked about, can he do it? Well, it's a different challenge than what he's had to do as bench coach, as base coach, as sort of minor league instructor. It's a very sort of different. It's a different job. So, will he step up to that? I have every confidence that he will. Can he actually do it? We will sort of learn that. Because the job is about managing personalities, it's less about, and there's plenty of important bullpen decisions and when to put in a pinch hitter, but that is much less important. And those only shift the odds a little bit in each individual game. So it's always hard to evaluate managers based on how many wins they have, even though, of course, in the end, we evaluate them on how many wins they have. But obviously, it's the big thing in 2024. Can you sort of get this team, everyone pulling in the same direction? And for every bit of frustration we've expressed on this podcast, particularly over the last year about Dusty, and the even more that there is out there on Twitter, Dusty's big strength is he got everyone to pull together. He did a really good job throughout his career of managing the egos and personalities in his clubhouse. And from that standpoint, it's big shoes for Joe Espada to fill.
And we're also learning, though, in this last year, Andy, that he didn't do as good a job at that. Dusty did, and he had issues with some players, and he had issues with the front office. Andy, what I'm kind of hoping to is Brian's point is, obviously a pinch hitting decision or a bullpen decision seems bigger than it is, but hopefully he's going to use some of the data at hand to help make better choices, doing things like, how many times do we message each other going, oh, wow, Stanek's going to do a second inning? He's never done that before, and then he gets blown up in that second inning. Hopefully he's going to use the information at hand as opposed to making decisions in spite of the information at hand.
Evidence would suggest that he probably will, but sometimes he won't, because sometimes there'll be something we don't know about that.
Sure.
And somehow we re-signed Ryan Stanek in this scenario, but screw Bregman, Stanek all the way. It's the strategy part of being a major league manager is so overblown at this point, because a lot of us are fans, at least the people I talk to, we're fans of the 80s National League baseball teams.
Right.
And there was a lot more about what you did on field, and screw the guys in the clubhouse. I don't care, because they're men and I make more than them, because the managers did at some point. Now it's, they're the employee of this club at the leisure of the athletes a lot of times. It seems to me that Brian's 100% correct when he says it's about managing the relationships, about knowing what these guys are going through that we don't talk about, what we know about that they are going through, the nagging injury we don't bother to report on because it's just a nagging injury they're going to play through. All those things go into the calculus. And I don't necessarily think that Dusty was bad at that. I think he was bad at communicating the reasons why, mainly because he didn't feel like he had to. Because again, he became a manager in the 80s National League, where his, I'm above reproach. Why would you dare question me? Look at the results. I don't think Espada is going to be that way. I think if he leaves a Ryan Stanek in for a second inning, you're probably going to get what the thought process was anyway. If that's something he's willing to share. And that's one of the things we don't know yet. We don't know how forthcoming a guy he's going to be. We don't know how much of the acoustication that Dusty liked to do was Dusty, and some of it might have been at the direction of the Astros PR department. Some of it might have been, because the sky was blue that day. You don't know about the personality.
And some of that because obfuscation is actually your job sometimes as major league manager.
Yeah. Literally, if Alex Bregman was going through a divorce and he's not hitting because he's going through the divorce, but he doesn't want anybody to know that he's going through the divorce, you're not necessarily, the job of the manager is not to disclose, well, he missed that pitch because he's thinking about his kids. That's not the job.
Yeah, 100%.
But Astros Twitter got angry because Dusty would basically tell Chandler Rome, it's none of your business why I made that decision. And I think there's a better way to not tell something than Dusty chose to do at the end. Now, whatever issues Dusty had with, Chas McCormick's brother and Chandler Rome and other people, that's on Dusty ultimately. And I think he really poor form on the way out the door, complaining about the Twitters and the bloggers. Are there still bloggers? I guess Brian's a blogger.
Yeah.
But he seemed to really mean Chandler, sort of asking him, "Why did you make that move?"
Yeah, I mean, 100%. And I think
that's me with the context. And
yeah, I think Twitter's and bloggers was Chandler Rome. That was just shorthand. And I guess that moment he decided not to call somebody out. I don't think Joe Espada's got that personality. I think he's going to be more media friendly. I think that's one of the components of being a major league manager in 2023, 2024. But we don't know.
Also, Dusty, that's part of your job, and we all have parts of our job we don't like to do, including no one comes and asks me, why I, talked about this in this particular lecture or made this assignment in a press conference. But that's part of your job. And
I get asked that
all
all the
unpleasant
time.
parts of our job, and you got to deal with it, Dusty, and you got to deal with it, Joe Espada, and
yeah. Well,
and we don't know what Joe Espada, he may have a very great personality right now. That first 5-game losing streak, how great is that personality? So consistency in that respect would be nice, because Dusty certainly wore those losses harder than he probably should have.
Well, and I just had this really weird feeling the last year Dusty was here with the Yarnier stuff, that Dusty had this combination of, well, I won a World Series and I wasn't even sure I was coming back until whenever. So I got this real, like, he almost felt angry to be there and was being angry. I do want to ask one quick question. It's a yes or no thing, because you guys are both schooled in on college football. Does Texas make the playoff? I am saying they do not make the college football playoff, Brian.
No. 3 undefeateds will win, and Oregon will beat Washington this week. Texas will be out. Sorry, James.
Yeah, and I have my issue with Oregon's. There's a lot of data that suggests they shouldn't be, but whatever. Andy, what do you think?
Hey, solidarity on the Oregon guy's going to win the Heisman over a better player.
Yeah.
So I'm with you.
The former Auburn player. I don't think they're going to make it. But you could go rich betting against me in college football. So, a lot of things would have to happen. I think The Athletic had a scenario matrix that they put out a couple of days ago, and basically of the 15 different scenarios, Texas made it in 3 of those scenarios.
Yeah.
So they've got a tough road to hoe, but I think you'd have to see Florida State lose. You'd have to see Oregon lose. And you'd have to see Alabama get beat pretty handily. I don't think Alabama jumps Texas, but I think there's some calculus in play. And Alabama is probably the one school that would get that kind of media consideration over Texas if it came down to those 1-2.
Yeah. Hopefully they're going to have somebody whispering in their ear going, ratings.
Yeah, but I think as it is,
against
I don't think there's
Alabama. I mean, I'm not telling you that Texas isn't a ratings juggernaut, but it's Alabama.
Be better than Oregon.
And if it's ratings, they're putting in Ohio State. God help us.
Yeah. The Oregon thing does bug me, because they do have a common opponent, and they do have Texas's strength of schedule was like 9th and Oregon's is 58th, but whatever.
And if there's any college football team which knows that head-to-head doesn't actually determine who gets in, it's Texas.
Oh yeah, I lived through 2008. Yeah. Well, I don't know. Like I was telling Andy before, I'm not going to get my panties in a twist over it. It's been a good season for the Longhorns. I don't think you can get too upset about something that essentially comes down to opinions, and that's just the way it goes. But what doesn't come down to opinions? The fact that you two are awesome. I don't know when we're coming back. We'll do at least one more episode before Christmas. You know what, guys? I like the fact that we're not going to just keep doing a weekly episode so we can discuss who the backup catcher is going to be, because what a waste of time. Yes, we agree, Andy? Waste of time?
100%. I was thinking that when I woke up this morning.
Brian, waste of time.
I mean, the half word difference could be, vital to something.
Andy could use the half word that would have come with extra sleep. This
There
is
is
Go
there
Astros.
is nothing more stimulating than discussing the 26 man on the roster, and that's what we end up doing with the Astros because they're usually pretty set by the time spring training rolls around.
Yeah, like to Brian's point, they've kind of already made their offseason stuff at last year's
Remember
trade
when we all
deadline.
were upset? Remember when people were upset? Not all us, but people were upset that Justin Durden didn't make the roster.
Yeah, I do. Now they think it was Spaghetti Arrighetti is going to be winning Rookie of the Year.
Yeah, there's no way we're going to deal him because he almost did well in minor league baseball.
Yeah.
Why? That is a question that we might want to pose for a future show. But what is it about? Is I don't know if it's our fan base or every fan base where we have a certain subset of our fans that have fallen in love with our minor leaguers, regardless of what their actual on-field performance is.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's perplexing as the Lance McCullers thing. Maybe
have
more so, but it's still perplexing.
You have people who are still convinced Pedro Leon's going to put it together.
Well, they saw that batting cage video of him before he was signed.
Hey, my belief in Mitch Milewski will never die.
I guess that's a good place to end it. That's a Mitch Milewski reference. This has been Go Astros for Andy and Brian. I'm James Christopher. We'll see you when we see you.